So in today's lesson, what we're going to do is talk about the ASP.NET identity, and we're going to use it for authorization and authentication. So let's just quickly have a look at the various levels in the .NET identity architecture. So far we've done the top level and the bottom level. And in today's lesson, we're going to focus on the middle two, the green section and the blue section. Okay, and in the green section, we want to use some of the features in identity. And in the blue, we can use Entity Framework to allow us to connect to the tables in the database for the purpose of managing who is accessing our application. Okay, and I'd like to pull up this tutorial right now. It's a great online reference. And we're not going to do all of it, but we are going to touch on some of the stuff inside of this online tutorial from Microsoft. So it's got a lot of really good stuff in here. And we're going to just simplify it, I think, and not make it overly complicated for what we want. Okay, but it's the Introduction to Identity on ASP.NET Core. And it was updated, I think, January 15th, 2020. So it's still pretty good and current. Okay. So if we look at what the difference between authentication versus authorization, okay, it comes down to really two things. Ultimately, I think it comes down to who versus what, or who and what. So really, if you look at this, you've got authorization, that's who, and it also it's kind of on a two-level thing. It tells me who you are, but then authentication, which is who you are, there's authorization, tells me what you're actually allowed to do. Okay, so this boils down to who are you and what are you allowed to do. Okay, so there's kind of two levels to this. If you look at the authorization tells me who you are, the authentication says, okay, that's great, but then we have to say, okay, what are you allowed to do? And within the entity framework, there's this other level, which is your authentication type. And you can see down on the bottom right, this is kind of stuff where it says you can log into our web application with, say, your Google account or your Facebook account. Okay, that's the kind of second level that we're talking to when we look at this. So if we get into the identity tables, this is really what it looks like. And this main box here in the middle is pretty important. So this is the back end of the identity tables. Okay, and this the center table here, this bigger one, it's got this unique identity. It's a string, and I think it's a global string as well, but it's meant to give us all these little options here. Okay, so for example, I've got two-factor authentication. So if you've had the experience where you tried to log into something, but you got sent a text or an email with a code, it's the two-factor authentication to get into something. Okay, there's another option is locking people out if they've tried to log into your application X number of times, which you didn't find to be acceptable. So your bank account, you try to get in too many times, unsuccessfully, you get locked out. So it has those kind of features built into it. Okay. The good thing is we can actually customize some of this for what we want to do. This is not set in stone. You can actually go in and do some editing and customization on this. So I think that's excellent. So identity uses these two classes, identity user and identity role. And it's boils down to who and the what. And so we're going to do a little modification to these two classes. And down the bottom, we've got to do some updating in our DB context class as well. Okay, and this is going to handle authentication and authorization through the use of these two other classes. So this is in our startup.cs file. We've got some slight configurations that we've got to change as well. So here they are, but we're going to get into them when we get into the actual Visual Studio and start modifying it. And then there's this one more thing that we have to do is our partial login that you've probably seen over on the right side of the screen. We've got to do some updates here. So you can see right now we need to replace what's existing there now with this other line of code at the bottom. So we'll make those modifications. So I think all in all, the amount of work that we actually have to do is pretty minimal. We're back in the web application that we've been working on for the last couple of videos. And one thing that I need to make you aware of is that the ASP.NET Core is cookie based. So the very first time I ran this, there's a good chance that I selected the option to accept any of my logins. I don't remember doing it, but that's not to say I didn't. So if you have your cookies turned off, then going forward each time when you try to log in, it's not going to save it for you. So you'll have to keep logging in over and over and over. So that's an important thing to note right from the beginning. I've closed down a lot of my files just to save some space on the screen. And I'm going to go into Views, Shared, and then I want to look at this _login partial.cshtml. I'm going to open that up. So when I open this up, I see this identity users here. And in the nav bar, I've got this first line here that says is signed in. And that means that when the person is signed in, you get this message, hello, with the name of the actual user right there in that first part. And simultaneously, of course, there's the log out button that the user is presented with. This doesn't call the controller, it actually calls a page for account logout that you can see that I've got highlighted right there. It doesn't go to the controller, it goes to a different page. So obviously if we're not logged in, we go to the else statement and we get these links instead. So register and log in. So if we go back to the actual page itself, you can see this register and login right here. Okay, that's the register, and then back we can go to login. And notice that it's all automatically been done for us already. So for our purposes right now, we haven't built the login. We are strictly in the else portion of this loop or this statement. Okay, we're down here right now, and we're going to come back and address this part up top. But for now, we are strictly in the register in the login part of that those statements. What we haven't talked about is this up here, and this is called areas, this folder, and inside entity, identity, and pages, and _view start. So we're going to open that up and have a quick look at that. So Microsoft has separated out any pages that do not have anything to do with the MVC structure. Okay, so these pages in here, they don't follow the MVC structure at all. They're completely separate, but they are available to us. So if we want to create some sort of separate page for our application, we can do that in here if we'd like to. So for example, if you want a custom login page or something along those lines, you could do it in here. Okay, and I'm not going to do it, but these are all of the items that are involved or available to you if you want to make a separate page altogether. Okay, suppose I did want to go in and do my own custom sign-in page. Okay, there are things that are available to us. So I'm not going to build this, but let's look at what's available. So new scaffold item. Okay, and you can see all of these things that are now in fact available to us. So if I go into here, or identity, and I click on this, I'm getting these options here. Okay, so there's a lot of different things in here. So manage email, delete personal data, lockout, external email, access denied. These are some of the examples of what's available in this dialog box that's an option to us. Another example would be a custom forgot password page, okay, or change password. So if I were to choose one of these, it would automatically give me that functioning template for doing that and starting that. Here's another one, reset password confirmation. Okay, so these are just templates that it would give me the option to do within my application, which would be custom. For now, let's just leave this and I'll cancel that. And let's go back and look at our register link. Okay, what are all the things that are here? My email, password, and a confirmation of my password. And then there's this messaging over here with a register button. So in this, I'm going to go ahead and try to do, I'm going to create an account and I'll call it a admin account. Admin at tutorial.ca, and I'll give it a password. Okay, and I'm getting this error because I needed at least 6 characters long. Okay, I'll hit the registration. And you see at the bottom it says, let Microsoft Edge save and fill your password for this site. Next, I'm gonna do never, just for the moment. Okay, and notice this, I'm getting password must have at least 1 non-alphanumeric character, password must have at least 1 lowercase, password must have at least 1 uppercase. So how about we come up with a different one? I'll call it login 123. Okay, and you can see that login 123, and it's the same one. Password must have at least 1 non-alphanumeric character. So do this one more time. Password 123 exclamation mark. Okay. Password 123 exclamation mark. There. Okay, and now I'm getting this error. So clearly it's not set up to handle the ASP.NET identity. So if you also look at the database, nowhere inside our tables have we created this anywhere to put this information. Okay, so it's kind of intuitive or obvious that it's not going to connect anything. It's got nowhere to connect to, and it hasn't been configured for our identity yet. So this is obviously something that we have to go in and address. So we can handle regular models like we've created from the database, but it doesn't know how to actually handle ASP.NET identity. Okay, so that's a big thing. We, in the first video, created the tables, which converted those over to models, and we've been using them. It can't do that with the identity framework. these are the changes that we need to go in and start making to our identity user and our identity role classes. Okay, so I'm going to go to my models and right click, add, down the bottom go to class, keep it as a class, and I will call this application user and hit OK. So even though Visual Studio created this as a generic class, it's actually a special class that we're producing here. And the reason that it's important is it's going to inherit from the identity user class. Okay, but it's not in there yet, so we'll have to go in and make sure it's in there properly. So I've added this comment that it inherits from ASP.NET Identities Identity User Class for authentication. And the reason that it's underlined right now is because if you look at these using statements, it doesn't have a reference to that yet. Okay, so what we're going to do is give it that reference to it. Okay, so I can do it in one of a couple of different ways. And if I come over to this line, show potential fixes, generate identity user is one. Fix format, identify user. So this using Microsoft.ASP Net Core.identity. Okay, and now look, we've updated it on line 1. Okay, and the error goes away. When we need a class to handle user accounts, this is what we need to reference. So if we actually take a moment and talk about what inheritance is, we don't have to actually do a lot in here. The reason being is because all these properties that we're looking for are already defined. So we can utilize everything that's in here, plus the properties that are in here in this class. But if we want to update that, what we are doing is saying take all of the properties from identity user and then supplement those even further if you had a reason to do so. So even if I highlight over that, I right click and I say go to definition, and I open all these boxes up, you can see what's in there. You can see everything that's inside of this identity user class. Okay. And that's a great thing about inheritance. Okay. So we can have everything that we want to use and then some inside of this application. So the next thing that we need to do logically is we need to create the identity role. So we have the who part of this, and now we need to create the what. So if we go back to models, add, class, stay there, and we'll say application role. Okay. So here it is as our application role, and it's used to manage roles for authorizations and inherits from identity role. And here it is already in place. If you didn't, then you could have right-clicked on that, gone to the suggested fix, and just like we did with the last class, the application users, you could have implemented this using statement at the top. At this point, all we've done is added the authentication and the roles. So we've got the who and now the what. I've opened up the Georgian Computers Context.cs file over in the models. And I want to show you that here, this context, this DB connection is actually, it's aware of cart, category, order detail in product, but it's not aware of the users yet. It's not aware of the other classes that we've just created inside the models folder. So we have to go in and address that, because if we were trying to run this and log in again, we would get an error saying that it can't possibly do what we want it to do because the context itself is not aware of these new changes that we've made. So what we need to do is modify the DB context to handle the user identities and the roles. In order to do this, we are going to have to change this context slightly. And the way to do that is to go up into our DB context, okay? And I'm going to add our application user, comma, and application roles. Okay, and I'll explain what we're doing. But what I'm essentially saying is, hey, use all the other, connect to all those other databases, but I need you to also get in there and deal with the application user and application roles database as well. What I'm missing here is this third parameter. And I don't know if you remember, but on the slide I talked about the schema that was provided by entity. And I mentioned that there was a user identifying string. So that's what we need to put in here. Okay, is this string. And there's one more thing to do, because this is no longer just your regular DB context. Okay, this is now an identity. If I can spell today, I'm struggling. Identity context, DB context. And so if I were to click on this, you'll notice that I get my opportunity to select the right new using statement. And I'm going to go ahead and select that one, and you can see that the entity framework core with identity has come up. Okay, so that's what we needed to complete that. So now what I'm saying is, hey, handle the other databases, but I also need you to handle the application user and the application role. And we're going to pass in your string for the user identification with the in that particular schema's primary key. And I'll add this comment here that the last parameter indicates the primary key of user ID values as a string. And I think what I'll do is I'll actually move this comment out and above. It's probably in the wrong spot. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. So some of you may or may not have been like me and getting this warning pop up right here in my warnings. And it's this line right here. It's talking about line 31. Okay, it's more of a hindrance than anything, but the simple fix to this, and I probably should have done it a while ago, the simple fix to that is I'm just actually going to comment it out. Okay, that warning goes away. It was a warning, that's all it was. And so just take that out and that warning goes away and you should be good to go for now. I've moved down to where I commented out that code, and I've added this one particular line. And I'm not even going to bother to try to explain it. It's apparently it's a bug fix. So what I suggest you do is put that in there and just move on. No point in explaining it. Without it, you're going to have detrimental things happening to your application. I did not write this bug fix. I'm just aware of it, and I put it in there just for your sake and mine. For now, I'm not actually going to run this or test it out. I'm just going to save it. But I think in terms of the database connection, we're good to go for that for now. And I'm going to close out some of this other stuff. I just want to get it out of the way. And I'll keep open my startup and my app settings.json. And then I think we need to go into startup and do a little bit more work, okay? Because this is what we need to have available as soon as the application starts up. So in my startup menu, this is the section that I want to have a look at right now. And we've been here before and we've done these different connections. So this is your default connection string, okay, and our Georgian computers context. And you see it again down here as well. So we need to make a few updates in this section here. What I need to do at the moment now is to take this line here. You notice it says add default identity. Okay, so what I'm going to do right now is I'm actually going to comment that out. And I'll move it down to give me some space, and then I'm going to replace it. So what I'm going to do, the first thing is I'm going to add this little comment there, configure identity to work with our DBase. So this will look like this, services, and obviously whenever you've got the chance, use the IntelliSense, add identity. Okay, and we need these brackets, these triangular ones, or whatever they're called. Application, and I'm looking for application user. And application role. Okay, and add that there. I'll go to the next line and I'm going to do add the default UI. There it is. Add default UI, and inside that I need UI framework. And it's given me the UI framework attribute, but I want for Bootstrap 4. Okay, and I'll close that off. Okay. And the other thing is, because when we do this, I want to still maintain that same look and feel. So add role. So add roles, brackets, application role, and here, and add role manager. And that's role manager. Application role again. Okay, so there'll be two of these brackets here, and then our other ones. And I've got two more of these to do. Oh. Add entity. Does it give it to me in there? No. Add entity framework. Stores. And it is our Georgian computers context that we need. And I'll try to explain this when I'm done everything. Add default token providers. Okay, so there's a lot of stuff there and I see quite a few errors, so I need to obviously get in there and clean up some of that. This is why I don't like to type in front of you guys. Okay, so that cleaned up that, and let me check out, show my potential fixes. So the first fix that I see, which is unusual, that You know, I created this class, we did it in the last step, but it should be picking it up. But you notice that my error says, hey, the type or namespace named application user could not be found. So if you go over to where I actually created it, you're going to see that unfortunately I typed it here incorrectly. So I could go fix it there, or I can fix it back here. So what I'm going to do is just match up the way it's spelled over there. And even though it's spelled wrong, that was the first fix there. And I need to now find out about this one, show potential fixes. So what might be the issue here with this one? So if I look down there, it's unclear to me. I've cleared that first error, but what I want to do, I'd like to come back to this. So at the moment, I'm just going to comment that out and I'm going to move on, because I'm not interested at the moment in formatting. I'm at this moment, I'm interested in connecting those, the entity framework. And what I'll do right now is add some further comments to what it is that I'm trying to do. So use our new application role class to manage roles and permissions. So that's one thing I'm doing. Second thing is I am point identity to the existing Georgian computers database, I guess, connection or context class. And I apologize for my horrendous typing. There's no excuse at my age that my typing is this bad. And the last comment that I want to make is this here about cookies. So use default cookie settings. Okay, so that's what I'm doing down there with this. These token providers is referencing within reference to cookies. So I'd like to again point your attention to this schema that we talked about earlier on in the video. And these are all the different tables that we're going to use for both authorization and authentication. Okay, and this was the string that I was talking about, that primary key for ASP.NET users ID. And if we go back into Visual Studio, and I come to this file called data migrations, and this line right here, it says create identity schema. So if I click on that, if you look at what that code is, if you look at that code, okay, this is a create table, and look at all the different, this is the ASP.NET users table. Okay, this is where it's creating that schema that I was talking about with that slide. Okay, so there's ID, which is a string. Okay, and all of these things are here. So when we actually go back in and try to register, this is what's going to get called, and this is what should build the tables. So if I go back into my Management Studio and I look at my tables, okay, none of that stuff has been created yet because I haven't properly configured everything and I haven't successfully logged in or tried to register with a new user. So when I'm successful and it's configured, I will be able to, the very first time, automatically have Visual Studio almost scaffold that those tables for us. Okay, so it's a pretty big thing that we're trying to do. And let's get back into the code and see if we can finish this off so that when we register, those scripts get run automatically and those tables get built. Worst case scenario, if we do have some sort of failure, at least we've been given the script by Visual Studio. Okay, so all of that stuff is in there. We could go in if we had to and do this manually, but I don't think you want to do that at this point, but it is possible. That's not going to happen. We're going to get this to work perfectly fine. So at this point, I've got the page set up and I haven't done anything, and I'm going to try and do another register. So notice it's already with the cookies, it's selecting this, and I'm going to put in just a dummy password. I'm going to call it capital A B C 1 2 3 4 5 6 exclamation mark. See, ABC 1 2 3 4 5 6 exclamation mark. So ABC 1 2 3 4 5 6 exclamation mark. Confirm that, and I'm going to go ahead and see if it lets me do it. And okay, so I've got something going on here. Can't reach this page. Okay, I'm going to hit a refresh. See what happens. Maybe I'll go back. That didn't seem to work as I was hoping. Okay, so the best way to tell if you've got a problem is, to go and test something out. Okay, so this is sending me here to this message, and it's telling me I got problems. So let's get into it and try to figure out what's going on. Okay, I don't mind showing these errors because there's a good chance that they're going to happen to you as well. Me personally, it would take a lot for me to go on to Snob Overflow, but some people swear by it. I try to stay away from a lot of the people on there. They're pretty rude and nasty. Some are really nice, but I find Snob Overflow is probably a great name for that website. There is one thing that I would really like to do though, and that's to go into my packages and confirm that I've got everything I need. I've got the Identity Framework Core. I've got Identity UI. I want to go in though and just make sure I've got everything. So under Tools, NuGet Package Manager, Package Manager, this here. And I'm just going to type in identity and see if everything is in fact in there. Now go to Browse. And I'm going to come down to this extension's Identity Core, ASP.Core Identity. Okay, and let's look at the latest version is 2.2.0, and it says not installed. Okay, so I am going to go ahead and install that, and I'm hoping that that makes a significant difference. So the installation is complete, and you can see it right here on this line. Okay, so I will I'll get out of there, close that over, and I'm going to do a rebuild. I'll just do a clean solution. Okay, 1 succeeded, 0 failed. Okay, so let's go back over to here and have a sneak peek at my tables. I don't see any difference with the tables at the moment. Okay, and if I go into here, I'm just checking everything. I'm trying to troubleshoot or debug and see where I may be having some problems. So in all these tables, I see cart category, order detail, product. Okay, so far I'm not seeing any indication of it being updated. Okay. So this is what I get after I did the installation on the Identity Framework in my package manager. Then I ran this, and this was the result. So notice even at this point, typically this would have taken us to the web page that we've been using so far, but this is where it's stopping, and I'm getting this invalid operation exception. Okay, so it has it, this ASP Net Core.identity user has been registered. So it's an interesting error that I'm getting. So let's keep going and see how we can maybe resolve this. So there is something that I do want to go in and change, which we were going to have to do anyway. But since I've clearly broken my home page, which you can see here, I need to go in now to Visual Studio, and I've got to make this one specific change. And I was going to do it anyway, but we're going to do it now, and hopefully that'll fix it. So application, if I spelled that right, remember I did this before, and I'm not the greatest speller today. So app. So let this be a lesson to you and to me. Okay. If you notice, I did it again. I spelled it wrong again. So if I change that back to the improperly spelled way, okay, then I can go and get it and put it in there. Now, let's run this. I'll do a build. And go to here and hopefully refresh this. And okay, it didn't like that. So I think what I will do is go through and do a start debugging. Let's see what happens here, if that possibly fixed the problem. There we go. Okay, so I'm right back to where we want it to be. All right, and I'll go ahead and delete that, and I'm back to a fresh page. Okay. So while I'm here, I'm going to go give this another try and see what happens with my registration. It gives me the impression that it's actually broken. One thing I did do is I went over to here and I right-clicked on it and I hit the rename. Okay, and when I did that, I always select the yes you want to, because it will ripple through the rest of your code. So earlier I spoke about this idea that we would be able to, in a similar way, do scaffolding. We've created our tables inside the database. Over here, let me close this down. We've created all of our tables. And I talked about this idea of being able to scaffold for all of our registration and login. However, that is pre-core technology, the way they've done that. So unfortunately, we have to do something backwards. We have to actually go in and create this script, and I'll put the script in the GitHub. And for those of you following me on Blackboard, I'll put the script in there. But we have to actually go in and create these. And I've got the actual script here in my server manager. And like I said, I'll upload that. But you have to actually run this script in order to create the tables to do all of your roles and your users. So if I actually go to my page and I do try to register, if I don't have those tables, it's going to say, well, where's the tables? Like, where do you want me to put this? So that's why I actually have to do this in reverse order. Now, there's one more thing I want to go back to. This was something that I started a while ago, but needed to fix. And I don't know if you remember, but I had this filled with Bootstrap 4. So I had it looking like this. And it was throwing this error, so I commented it out. That's actually a mistake. I need to come back. I'm going to take this out. Okay, because without it, let me show you. With that in there, or commented it out, when I do this and I go back to my page and I'll run a refresh, and I'll actually try to register. nothing happens. And you see I'm getting this area equals identity page. So I did a whole bunch of snooping around on the internet, and I found the solution to that, and it turns out that this was my problem. Okay, I had a problem with my identity, or my fault UI, add fault UI, or default UI, sorry. So I have to have that line in there, because when I change that, and I'll save it, I'll go back, and I'll just refresh that. I'll go home, hit the registration, and now I'm getting that again because I haven't saved it. I need to rebuild it because it's in CSS code and it doesn't do anything unless I recompile it. So I go back to here, I'll hit registration, and registration now works. So that's an important step that I had in there that I needed to add back. So if you don't have that, you're not going to get your UI properly completed. So before I test this out again, I want to emphasize that I've already gone and I've got a script, or sorry, a file, and I've navigated to where I have this script, okay, which is what you're seeing here. And before I run that script, I have to make sure that I'm actually in my Georgian Computers database. If I'm not in that, I don't know where those tables are going to get made, but they won't be in my Georgian Computers. So I've got that script, I'm in here, and then I ran the execute, and then it created all of these ASP.NET tables in here. So if you open them up and you see I've got all of these different things. So that's the one thing that I had to ensure that I do. So let's go ahead now and try and do a test. So the cookies have saved all of my other things. So I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, A, capital A, B, C, exclamation mark. Okay, and now I'm going to do a registration. So you see that it's registered. And now look here at the top, it says hello admin@tutorial.ca. So I've done the actual registration of my account now. So I think at this point I want to go back to my database that I've built from the script that I've run, and I'll go over to tables ASP.NET users, and I'll click on that table, and then I'm going to right click on there and select top 100 rows. So as you can see, my email is in there. Okay, so I've been added to the database. That's great. And if you look, there are some other information in here that you can look at. But if you notice here, 2-factor enabled. I didn't do that. I didn't do the phone number or anything like that. Okay, so when I registered, it was just email and putting in a password. Okay, so the password's been hashed, and there's nothing really of any more significance in here. So normalized email is admin@tutorial.ca. So we're in really good shape if we've gotten to this point now. I'd like to make one comment about all of the errors that I've been making. And there's a reason I'm not editing out all the errors in the video. I mean, there are some, but for the most part, I'm encountering some problems, and I'm leaving the problems in the video because I'm anticipating that if you're following along and doing this, you're going to get the same problems. And I don't want you to panic. I just want you to see what you may encounter as you're doing this. Because if I took all the errors out of this video, you'd be stuck the first time that you got something that didn't actually work. So by me leaving in the videos, you're learning and you're not panicking, and you just realize, hey, we're going to work through this. So that's why I keep leaving the different errors in there. Okay. Another thing that I'd like to mention, that in my GitHub repository for this, for Georgian Computers, I've actually included the script. It's identity table script.sql. So I've added that into my GitHub repository. So if you want to get your hands on that, that's where it's located. Okay. So far, because in this video, all we've been really doing is a lot of the back-end stuff. What this means is that at current, we're able to create a registration, a login, but right now, if I go to any of these things here, these are product categories, create new. I don't want the general public to be able to log in and have access to that, right? This is kind of disastrous when the public can go in and tamper with that. So we have to go in and start figuring out, okay, now we have the who, now we have to go and start defining the what. So what we're going to do now is go start working on restricting access to only people that have the right to get into the back end of the actual website. Okay, remember, we've only been doing what the company staff are able to look at right now. We haven't started to build the customer side of this store. Okay, so that's a pretty significant thing that we have to work on. So let's get started on that. So I want you to take a moment and think about where inside my Solution Explorer that I would want to go. Which file do you think? I've shut them all off, but if we look at this, for example, we're back in here. I'm in categories, okay, and I'm trying to restrict functionality or access to specific people, just company employees that have the rights to do this. Okay, so where do you suppose, if you take a minute and really think about that, where do you suppose I should be going to start defining those restrictions? And I'm hoping that you realized it's in my controller. The controller, that's what it does. It controls many things, and one of the things it does well is it controls access. So let's go into your categories controller and start working on some of that code. So at the moment, I'm in the product categories. Okay, and I'm logged in. So if I want to go and do a delete, it'll ask me if I want to delete this laptop category. And I'm not going to do it, but it allows me to do it while I'm logged in. Okay? But what happens if, let me take this, and I'm going to go to a different browser, put this in, because I've got cookies, and if I try to log in under this here, and you can see the difference. With this version, I'm logged in, but if I go to a different browser, the cookies didn't log me in. Okay, but if I do this, go to categories here, and I get in, it gives me access to this. And even though I'm not registered, I can still go in and perform the same functionality. So I want to go in and I'll show you something really quick in Visual Studio. So I'm going to go into this, down to our delete. That's edit. What I'm looking for is delete 5 right here. And I'm just going to add in, let's keep looking, and I got to find the line that I want. So I'm in my categories controller, and I'm at delete 5, but you're looking for this iAction result. Okay. Now notice there's a couple of different titles. This is a get. Okay, I want to be in the get, and I'm going to go right here and just put in this simple line, and it's square bracket, and it's authorized. Let's see if I did it right. Yeah, okay, so I'm getting this error, and it's asking me for a potential fix, show the fix, and I'm gonna go ahead and select that. Okay, so what it did is it added at the top this authorization package. Okay, so when I go back down to here, all right, the error has gone away. So I'm going to build that. And let's go back. Okay, so I'll just go back, and this is the one that I'm logged in under. And I want to go and do a delete, and it allows me to do the delete. But let me go to the other one where I'm not logged in, and I'm going to hit a delete. And look at what it does. It asks me to log in. Okay, so just by putting that one simple line of code, I've drastically changed the access. So I think that's a really good thing. And you know, it was very, very simple to do. It was one simple line of code, not even an entire line, just one word. Okay, so that's pretty powerful, I think. So it doesn't make an entire amount of sense for us just to restrict the delete. Okay, we want to be smarter than that, and I want to actually restrict the entire page. So I'm going to take that out of just the delete. Okay, and I am going to go to the very top of the categories controller, and I'm actually going to put that right in here, right at the top of my class, because now I want to restrict my entire class. Sorry, I need to move that up. I put that in the wrong spot. I need to be up here. Okay, so this now is giving me the same effect that I had with delete, but over the entire controller. Okay, so I'm going to build this. And now let's go back to our site here. Okay. Okay, so I can go back to categories. Okay, I'm still logged in. I can do edit. I can do details and delete. It still allows me to do that. But when I'm in here as a anonymous user, right, I'm not logged in at all. Look it. So now I'm totally anonymous. I can't get into any of those things now, right? So I tried to get into categories as an anonymous user with no registration. I can't get into anything, and it just directs me right back to the login page, which is exactly what we want. So there is something that I want to show you that kind of allows you to make very minor exceptions if you want to. And you're seeing from my index, okay, so that's my basically just my categories page. That's all that is, and I'm logged in. Let me go to my other one. Okay, go to here, categories. Okay, so it doesn't let me look at anything, and I'm still anonymous. But if I want to just be able to let the user see my categories page, I can do this little thing here just above my index. I can write in allow, you see it, IntelliSense comes up, allow anonymous. And so when I build this and I go back to this one here, and then I put in my categories, did I build it? Yeah. So it allows me to see that. So I'm not registered, but I can still kind of get to this point. So that's an example where you can sort of make an exception for anonymous users. But if I try to do a delete, it automatically takes me right back to my login page. It's asking for my authorization or my credentials. Okay, so that's one little thing. I don't necessarily know all the use cases where that'd be a good idea, but they do exist. So if you wanted to do it, it's this allow anonymous. So if we look at this categories page right now, we're an anonymous user. what it's giving the user is a couple of hints that there's some things that they have the option to try to do. One is this create category or create new, and then you see the edit details and delete. So it alerts your anonymous user to the fact that there's things you can do, but unless you log in, you can't, right? So let's go in and address that issue, because it's similar to, for example, if I'm on Blackboard and I'm posting things to Blackboard for students, then there's a lot of stuff in Blackboard that I'm authorized to see and do and upload. Whereas the students, actually, there's a lot of things that you don't get to see that I can hide from you. So because our permissions are very different based on what we've been given by the administrators of Blackboard, I know what's available, I know what's possible to do behind the scenes, but students who are logging into my Blackboard class have no idea. So what I want to do is look at this and these three things. Okay, so the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to go into I'm going to go back into this page here, and I'm going to throw in a couple of if statements. So I'm actually in my index of my categories, right? I'm in the index of categories, and I'm going to just do this simple if statement. So at if, okay, and I'll do my thing here, and I'm going to say user, it's in there in the IntelliSense, which is always a great sign, identity dot is authenticated, right? And I like to definitely spread out my brackets. It just makes it a lot easier to read. Okay. Oops. And it took both of them. What is that? Okay, so I am going to save that, build the solution. And let's go back to our anonymous person here and refresh that. And let's see if this disappears. Yeah, so that disappeared. So that means that I know about it when I'm actually logged in, which is this, but somebody who is not authenticated or authorized to be in here doesn't even know that's a possibility. That's hidden from them, because code-wise, what I've said is user's identity is authenticated. Okay, so I can take this and add it in one more place, because maybe I don't want them to see all of this stuff as well. Okay, so let's go down into this spot here. Okay. So I'm going to go right outside my TD. I want to keep the TD inside there. And I'll paste that. And it's looking for another bracket right there. So it's the same code. It's the user.identity.isAuthenticated. And I'll save that and I will build it. And now you see that it built. Let's go back to here, and the plan is for this to disappear. So as I refresh that, that should disappear here. And there, it does. So what it's saying is, hey, I've got the categories here, but the people that are not registered or logged in have no idea what's behind the scenes there. While over here, as a logged in person, it's all good to go. So even if I refresh that, it stays because I'm logged in. I'd like to raise the point that this is really our very first level of authentication. Okay, this is sort of the difference between the public and employee staff. That's just the first level. Okay. So in reality, we have done nothing with roles. Okay, we've just really addressed the who and a little tiny bit of the what, but we haven't talked about roles yet, and so we have to get in there and start doing that, because there's no difference between me creating an account and somebody else in the public creating an account. Once you've created the account, you've got the same access that I do. And if I'm the administrator of this website, that's not a good thing to have, Joe Public be able to get in there and start manipulating all of your back end. So we need to get in there and start addressing all the different roles for the use of the actual website between the public and employees. So if I go back to my new tables that I've created today, and I look at roles, okay, I go to this, and if I do select top 100 roles, or rows, sorry, I've got nothing in there. Okay, there's nothing. So this is what we have to address. So there's no real way to do this automatically. The adding the roles in so for customers or students or administrators or professors or whatever it is that you would have to do. So what we're going to end up doing is doing this manually, and I will post this to GitHub into Blackboard. But I've got these simple 3 lines, and let's see if I can actually blow that up a little. Okay, so what I've got is this administrator. So I've got the 2 different roles, okay, customer and administrator. Okay, so all I've done is it's an insert into ASP.NET Rules, which is this table down here. ID, name, normalized name, values 1, administrator. Okay, so I'm gonna run this, and then we should be able to go in and manipulate or define these roles for individuals. So what I want to make sure though is that I'm still in my Georgian computers, okay, and I'm gonna run this. I'll execute this. Okay, so that worked just as we had hoped. Okay, so that first role that I had for the person that was signed in, or the one that I did, that's going to go in as an administrator. And then anyone after that, I can define whether they're administrator or customer. So I've saved that. And what I'm going to do is I think I'll go to my GitHub. I'll get out of there. Go to here. I'm in my GitHub for Georgian computers, and I will upload a file. Choose your file. Right here, SQL users and roles. And I will just do a commit. So if you're looking for it, it's right here. That's the script that I just ran. Okay? Don't say I've never given you anything. So at this point, I think what I'll do is I'm going to go in and create a new account, and I'm going to register this, and I'm going to call it customer at tutorial.ca, and I'll give it a password of 456789, capital A, lower b, exclamation. And awesome. Now this, I'm going to use the cookies, and I'm going to go ahead and save that because I don't feel like typing in this thing 20 different times. Okay, so I've now got my customer here, and I've got my admin here. So let's go start assigning individual roles to whether you're administrator or customer. Okay. Okay, so like I said before, now I have 2 different accounts. But this customer, if I go into categories, does it have it? Yeah. See, my customer now can still go in and see all of these different things. So I have to make that division of the roles in terms of what they're allowed to access and what they're not. I want my admins to be able to see all this, but I don't want my customers to see this. And then to add to that, I don't want people that are not registered at all to see my create new or all of my details. Okay, so we've got to go in and do this second layer and start assigning the different roles to the different types of people that are logging into our accounts. So if I go back to my categories controller and I go to my who I've authorized, what I can do is define the role. So if I've got role equals, sorry, that's roles, administrator. I want to make sure I spell it correctly. Oh, and I got to close that out. Okay, so that's the first part of that. So I will go ahead and build this solution. And let's refresh that. Okay, so I've refreshed that, and let's now go back to categories. Okay, it's still letting us do something, but watch. Access denied. Access denied. Right? So it's still visible to me, but it's not functional. So if I go back to my administrator, I can go create new, and it allows it. Okay, so I've now started to segregate out the differences between the role of an administrator and the role of a customer. And simply all I did was have this. And if you're wondering where's administrator coming from, go back to the database. This is administrator. So if I define you as an administrator, that's what you're given access to. If I define you as a customer, then that's what. If I want to have more than one role, I'm going to have to do it this way. Oh, should have been... Okay, if I want to have multiple roles defined in a certain kind of a way. Okay, but for now, I will come back to that one issue that I was talking about in terms of restricting the customers. Okay, so for now it's actually letting me do that. That's because I haven't assigned customers their role yet. I've only currently got the role for the administrator set. So I'll come back shortly and do that. One thing I would like to do right now is I'm getting a little bit tired of having to go in and type this categories. So as an administrator, I'm going to add this categories to my nav bar because that's starting to get a little bit tiring. So what I need to do is actually navigate over to, so I'm over in my layout.cshtml, and I've gone down to where it's home, about, and privacy. And I think I will just copy and paste that item here. So I'll copy, paste, and yeah, okay, I'm going to add that in there and change this to categories. And my controller is categories. Okay, and let's make sure that this I'm going to wrap into an if statement just in case, because it's going to depend on who is trying to access this. Okay, I want to start restricting roles. Okay, so I need to put this into an if statement similar to what we did the last time. And the way I want to do that is I'm going to go over top of this, and I'm going to say at if, slightly different than the last one, user dot is in role. Okay, so I don't want to authenticate this person. They're already in the system. Okay, we're gone to a next level. So if they're inside this role already, then I'm going to say add. And the only thing that's really going to screw this up is if I don't actually do the spelling properly, which seems to be often. Okay, so let's save that, build it. Okay, you can see I've got an error here, right? It's not updating what I wanted. But if I actually click on that, it's introducing some problems. So let's go figure that out. So the first issue that I had when trying to put in the categories is that I actually didn't change the tag for it. If I go to home and then I click categories, it's doing a double categories category. So I have to fix that as well. So looking at this code, I think the mistake that I made was changing that. That should be index. Okay. And you see the URL, and then I click categories. Notice it goes right to where we wanted it to go. I'm an administrator and I've got everything. And I still have full access to everything I wanted to do. So I have 3 screens set up. I'm logged in under admin. Then I have customers, you can see here, and then a non-registered, well, not even, just the public, somebody looking at the website. So if I go ahead and I look and I go to home, notice I put in the categories in the nav bar. I still have access to everything that I want as an admin. But then when I go to a regular customer, notice I don't have that stuff there. But I can still technically put in categories at this point. But it is somewhat restricted. Okay, I don't have complete access like as though I'm an admin. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to end the video there today. We've covered a lot of ground. This is turning out to be a lot longer than I was expecting, but we got a lot done. We're going to come back in a future video and finish off some more authentication and more authorization. But for now, I think we've got enough to work with going forward. And so thanks a lot for watching the video. I know it's longer than usual, but we had to cover this ground. Anyway, thanks very much, and I'll see you in the next video.